right, guys, so check it out. So, the next method I want to teach you guys how to solve a quadratic equation is with completing the square. So, y'all, when do we use the completing the square method? Well, guys, we're actually going to talk about that first because, first of all, guys, we can't use the square root method on this one because there's a bx term, right? Do y'all see that guy there? So we can't use the square root method. So, guys, my natural inclination would be then to factor. Does that make sense, y'all? I would then factor because I see those little guys, and so I'm going to think to myself, you guys don't have to write this down because there's nothing that works for it. But, guys, I would think to myself, okay, what two numbers are going to multiply to -8 but add up to 6? Are there any numbers that work for that?
4 and 6, 4 and 2.
Well, +4 and +2 don't give you -8, do they?
Oh, no, they don't.
So, guys, this one is not factorable. So, guys, you use completing the square when you can't factor. All right? So, when you can't factor, this is when we complete the square. Now, guys, yesterday or last class, when we couldn't factor, then what I recommend doing is you go ahead and you type in your equation. So we say, okay, well, what is x squared plus 6x minus 8? Because, guys, sometimes when you can't factor, you have no real solutions, right? Oh, but it looks like we do have how many solutions? 2. But they're just, do they look like they're whole numbers?
No.
Eesh, no. They're going, and in fact, because you can't factor it, now we know they're actually irrational numbers. So they're not even numbers that can be expressed with a fraction. So it's a decimal that just goes on forever that cannot be expressed with a fraction, like pi is an irrational number. Those irrational numbers just keep going and going and going, just like irrational people just keep going and going and going. Irrational numbers are like that. They just you can never make them make sense. So, I'm being honest, right? So guys, your answer is going to be irrational here because you can't factor it. So, guys, this is when we have to use our completing the square method. When you can't factor, when you can't use the square root method, and let's say you don't have a calculator, so you can't graph it, you can't find it that way. So how do we solve a quadratic equation by completing the square? Well, guys, what we want to do, completing the square, this term means that we want to create a perfect square trinomial. Do you guys remember what a perfect square trinomial is? We did this on our warm-up. All right, it can be represented 2 different ways. And guys, I'm going to write this up at the top of our page here. And so it can be written 2 different ways. It can be written as a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. And if it follows this perfect square trinomial pattern, when you factor it, it factors really beautifully into a plus b squared. Do you guys remember doing that on our notes? Okay, now there's also another one, and this one is if we have a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, and that equals a minus b squared. So the difference here, guys, is you still have an a squared and a positive b squared, but you either have a plus 2ab or a minus 2ab, and that messes with that's a plus b or a minus b. You guys remember doing this? You guys tracking with me? Okay? So what we are going to do is we are going to take our problem and we are going to create a perfect square trinomial. And we are going to do this with a magic number. Okay? So I'm going to teach you guys how to do this. All right. So the first step that you do is you always want to move the C term to the right side of the equation. Okay, so it's not going to be equal to 0 anymore. So we want to move the C term to the right side. Oh, I need to write the word side, not just say it. Of the equation. All right, so these steps are going to be pretty important to write down. Okay, so you want to move the C term to the right side of the equation so it looks like this. And so what we'll have is we will have x squared plus our bx plus, then guys, you're going to leave a little blank. You're not going to have any, you're kind of going to leave a blank spot. I like to write a little line. And it's going to equal my negative c plus, and then you're going to leave a little blank. So what we are going to do is we are going to find a magic number to put on both sides of the equation. All right, guys? So for number 1 down here, our negative 8 is a problem. So we're going to remove this negative 8, move it to the other side, and kind of leave a holding pattern. All right? And so what we're going to do is we are going to find our magic number that creates a perfect square trinomial. All right? So we have this guy here. So guys, your magic number is find b over 2 squared. So this right here is going to be your magic number. You take your b term, you divide it by 2, and then you square it. So this is your magic number to complete the square. All right? So if you guys need to highlight that, box that, do something, b over 2 squared is going to be your magic number. All right? And what we want to do is then, just like we have it kind of set up right here, we are going to add that magic number to both sides. And once you add your magic number, you can factor. That magic number just created a perfect square trinomial. So we can factor the perfect square trinomial. All right? And then our step 5 is that we solve it just like we did. Now that we've created a perfect square trinomial, we're going to solve it just like we did on the page before. All right? So we are going to take the square root of both sides. And remember, whenever you take a square root of something, a positive number, you're going to get 2 possible answer choices. And so you're going to solve for both values of x. Are you guys good with that? So, honestly, this is a lot of words and a lot of steps. And the way that you're going to learn how to do this is just by doing it. All right? So, these steps are good reference for you as you guys work on your homework and different things. But honestly, they might not make a lot of sense right now. They're going to make a lot more sense when we actually do it. So when do you use completing the square? You use it when you can't factor. We've already talked about that. Or if you can't do the perfect square method. And guys, you want to make sure that your a, the coefficient, the a must be 1. So if it's not 1, you're going to have to make it 1. And guys, I also recommend only using it if your bx, if your b term right there is an even number. And guys, the reason I recommend only using it when your b is an even number is because you have to divide b by 2. And so taking the square of like a fraction is really annoying. Does that make sense? Or yeah, squaring a fraction is really, it just makes it really messy. So guys, I only recommend using completing the square if your b is an even number. If your b is an odd number, then you get to use the quadratic formula, which we're going to talk about after spring break. Okay? But regardless, guys, one thing that's really cool about completing the square is this method will work. This method will pretty much, will always work. All right? If your A is not 1, then you're going to have to divide by things to make it 1. If your B is not even, it's going to be annoying because you're going to have to deal with fractions. But guys, this method will always work. It might look really messy and it might be really annoying, but it will always work. Does that make sense? So it's really dependable, but it's a little bit of a pain in the booty. So I'm going to walk you through this and we're going to see how this guy actually works. All right, so we have x plus 2 plus 6x minus 8. Now guys, we've already determined this cannot be factored. So your first thought is, oh, if it can't be factored, maybe it has no solutions. But remember, we graphed it, and it does have solutions, but they're just irrational solutions. So we are now going to try by completing the square. So guys, my first step says move the c term to the right side of the equation. So I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So this now becomes x squared plus 6x. And guys, then I'm going to do plus. I'm going to leave a little blank spot. Are you guys okay with that? And that's going to be equal to what's now on my right side of the equation? The 8. And then I'm going to say plus. I'm going to leave a little blank spot. All right? Because this is where my magic number is going to go. Okay? So when we complete the square, you kind of leave a little placeholder. So speaking of magic numbers, we need to find that magic number. And that magic number is b over 2 squared. I'm going to zoom in a smidge so y'all can see better. Okay? So the magic number is b, so that's 6 over 2 squared. So guys, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So my magic number is 9. So guys, if I put a 9 right here and a 9 right there, if I add, 9 to both sides, then what I have done is now I have created a perfect square trinomial on the left. Do y'all see that? So what will this look like when we factor that perfect square trinomial? This will be x plus what? So we take the square root of x squared to get x. We take the square root of 9 to get 3. So this was our perfect square trinomial, and when we factor it, it becomes a squared binomial. You guys remember that? Okay? And then, what is it equal to? Well, guys, what's 8 plus 9? 17. Okay? Now that we have it right here, sorry, my fonts look weird. I don't know why I changed sizes. But guys, so x plus 3 squared equals 17. So now, what do I do if I want to solve?
Square it.
Yeah, we square it just like we did on the page before. So we are going to square both sides, and we are left with x plus 3 is equal to, can 17 be simplified, y'all? The square root of 17? So I'm going to leave it as plus or minus the square root of 17. Are you guys okay with that?
Yep.
Now, we can't even simplify that with the radical. Like, there's nothing you could even take out of 17. It's a prime number. So that is plus or minus square root of 17. So now we want to solve for x with both of these. So guys, if I subtract 3 from both sides here, then what I am left with is I'm left with x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 17. So you can write it like this if you just want to write it one time. Or you could also write it as two separate solutions. X equals negative 3 plus the square root of 17. Or x equals negative 3 minus the square root of 17. Okay? So you can write it either way as long as you understand that this guy is two different solutions. Does that make sense, guys?
Yep.
Okay? So this right here is a really nasty, irrational number. So if we actually put these little square root of 17 business in our calculator, if I went here, and so look, we're like right above 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and right above 1. Negative 7 and positive 1 about. So guys, if I say negative 3 plus the square root of 17, that's going to give me 1.123105626. Does that look like that's about where one of my zeros is? Yeah. If I go over here and I do negative 3 minus the square root of 17, that's going to be negative 7.123105626, whatever, right? Well, guys, if I go back to my graph, does the other one look like it's about at negative 7? It does. But it's an irrational number, okay? So it just keeps going forever and ever and ever. All right? So how do you guys feel about this method? Ish? All right, we're gonna keep going. Now here's the thing, Miss Humanek, why would I ever do this if I can just calculate my zeros on my calculator? Well, guys, sometimes your answer choices are going to be in radical form. They're going to have those square roots in there, okay? So you're going to have to be able to recognize it when it's a square root. Does that make sense, guys? Also, you might not always have access to a calculator where your technology will work really beautifully, all right? So, in fact, there will be even some portions of your tests in coming years. I'm pretty nice, and I let you guys use calculators on your tests all the time, but that doesn't always happen, all right? Especially when you get up into geometry honors and stuff like that. So, guys, we got to be able to do this by hand as well, okay? So let's take a look at number 2. We're going to do the same thing here for number 2. And guys, your B term is the same positive number 6, so it's like the same stinking thing. But y'all, can we factor number 2 here? Is there any two numbers that multiply to 2 but add to 6? Nope. So this one cannot be factored, but I want to see, does this actually have a solution? So I'm going to say x squared plus 6x now instead of minus 8. I'm going to say plus 2 because I don't want to do all this work, y'all, if it's just not even real numbers. Ah, crap. Definitely has a solution. Okay, so we got to do the work. Does that make sense? So it definitely has two solutions, but they're irrational numbers. So we're going to do the exact same thing. This time we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. And this is going to give us x squared plus 6x plus, we don't know what that magic number is yet, is equal to negative 2 plus whatever the magic number is. Now, guys, in this case, our magic number is going to be the same thing because my b is the same. So, our magic number here is going to be b squared, which is b over 2, so 6 over 2 squared. So again, guys, my magic number is 9. Your magic number is not always 9. Please pay attention. It's not always 9. It just happens to be on these first two. So, now that we got a magic number of 9, how can we factor this perfect square trinomial? Okay, well, we're going to take the square root, right? So the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 9 is 3. And guys, is this plus 3 or minus 3? Plus, because that's a plus 6. So then, and it is equal to negative 2 plus 9 is going to give us 7. Are y'all cool with that? Okay? Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and we have x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 7, because 7 is not a perfect square, so we have to leave it as such. So that becomes x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 7. So now we are going to subtract 3 from both sides, and we are left with, I always like to put my whole number in front of my radical. So that becomes x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 7. Now, you could also write it out as negative 3 plus the square root of 7 and negative 3 minus the square root of 7. Or you can just leave it as 1 if you don't want to have to write it out twice. Now, I want to go ahead and check my answers and make sure I'm not crazy. So remember, when we graphed this, it became, we saw that we had these numbers here, x squared plus 6x plus 2. That's our graph. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say negative 3 plus the square root of 7 gives me negative 0.35. All right, that looks pretty good. That's that little first 0. And then I'm going to go again, negative 3 minus the square root of 7. Let's see. Ooh, that gives us negative 5.6. I'm going to go to my graph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, negative 5.6 would be my other graph. Does that kind of make sense, guys? Are you guys tracking me on that? All right. So, completing the square. It's a little bit of a bear, but it is really, really valuable when you don't have access to calculators and all that good stuff. Okay? So now we're going to do a couple more. All right? We're going to do 2 more of these. And so we're going to skip number 3 because we have the same stinking negative, we have the same b value of 6, and I want us to do something different. So now we're going to have a b value of negative 4. All right, y'all? So what is our first step for number 4 right here? We want to go ahead and, we want to add our 8 to both sides. So I'm going to add 8. So this is going to give us x squared minus 4x plus the little blank spot is equal to 8 plus the little blank spot. Are you guys good with that? So now, y'all, and this cannot be factored, can it? Nothing can give you negative 8, but add to 4. Let's make sure this actually has real solutions before we do all the work. Let's not do the work if we don't have to. Negative 4x minus 8. I want to see, I got to have the x in there, don't I? There we go. X squared minus 4x minus 8. We're going to see what it looks like. Dang it. We definitely have 2 real solutions, so this is worth the extra work here. It looks like they're not whole numbers. So let's see here. So what is my magic number going to be, y'all?
Negative 4.
So we're going to use this negative 4 here. So it's negative 4 over 2 squared. So what's negative 4 divided by 2? Negative 2 times negative 2 is going to be a positive 4. Okay? So guys, your magic number is always going to be positive. All right? It's always going to be positive because a positive times a positive gives you a positive, and a negative times a negative still gives you a positive. So your magic number is always going to be positive. Do y'all feel good about that? Okay. So now, if we are going to factor this perfect square trinomial, that is going to give us x, because the square root of x squared is x. What's the square root of 4? 2. And is it going to be minus 2 or plus 2? Minus, because we have a minus 4x. So it's minus 2 squared. And that gives us is equal to 12. All right? So now we got to take the square root of both sides. So that gives us x minus 2. Oh, I guess I don't need the parentheses. Sorry. What am I doing? That gives us x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 12. Okay, So we're going to take a little side note here. Guys, can the square root of 12 actually be simplified?
Yeah.
It can. Do you guys remember doing this? It's been a hot minute. But let me get a different color. Hold on. All right. So if we're going to simplify this guy here, I'll do maybe pink. Sure. Feeling pink today. All right. So guys, y'all remember how to simplify the square root of 12? Y'all remember that? Okay, so we're going to go here, and I'm going to say 12 is what? 4 and 3, 2 and 2. Do you guys ever remember doing this? Those lovely little factor trees? Okay, so this now becomes plus or minus the square root of 2 times 2 times 3. Is this ringing any bells, y'all? Okay. This is why completing the square is not my favorite, all right? So then we go here. We have our pairs. We take it out. So this is really plus or minus 2 times the square root of, not 12, but the square root of 3. All right? Is this ringing any bells, guys? Okay. We did this, I think, before Christmas. I can't even remember, y'all. All right? So we have x minus 2 on all those. Okay, so now we've simplified our radical. So we have 2 square root of 3. And now, guys, what we are going to do is we are going to add 2 to both sides. Now, you can't add, since this doesn't have a radical, they don't add together. So really, this is x equals 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 3. All right? This is a little bit crazy. So it's 2 plus 2, the square root of 3, and 2 minus the 2 square root of 3. Okay? And remember, we can't combine radicals unless they have the exact same thing under the radicand. So let's confirm this on our calculator choice here. So we have 2 plus the square root of 2 plus 2 square root of 3 and 2 minus 2 square root of 3. So I'm going to go back to my front here. I'm going to say 2 plus 2 square root of 3 and 2 minus 2 square root of 3. This gives us 2 different values, 5.46, negative 1.46. Let's see if that matches our actual, hey, negative 1.46, sure. 5.46, sure, that looks pretty good. Does that make sense, you guys? Now, here's the deal. If you guys are doing this and you guys are looking at a multiple choice test, and all your answers are in radicals, you know what you could do is, guys, you could find your answers on the calculator, right, with our little second trace here. You could do your you do your intersections, and guys, you would get that negative 1.46412, all right, or 102. So then, guys, you could take each answer choice and convert each answer choice into decimals as well. Does that make sense, guys? So if you really, really, really didn't want to complete the square, you could find your answer here on your decimals here with your calculator, and then you could go back and convert each answer choice and find which one gave you the same decimals. That's a lot of work and a lot of typing stuff in your calculator, but you technically could do it that way. All right? So I'm going to do one more with you guys right now, and then I'm going to give you guys a chance to do this here. All right? So I'm going to do number 5 with you guys. So for number 5, we have a problem. What is wrong with this first term here, this negative ax or negative 3x squared? What?
It's not 1.
It's not 1. So we got to get it equal to 1. So how are we going to get it equal to 1? Divide everything by negative 3. Are y'all comfortable with that? So this now becomes x squared minus 8x plus 14 equals 0. So y'all, can I solve this? I mean, can we do this by factoring? No, unfortunately we cannot. Because there's nothing that multiplies to 14 but adds to negative 8. We got 2 and 7. If that was negative 9, it would work, but it doesn't. It's not. So we're not going to do it by factoring. So now we're going to do it by completing the square. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract my 14 from both sides. And I'm left with x squared minus 8x plus my blank is equal to negative 14 plus my little blank. So guys, what is our magic number going to be? I guess I can do it off to this side. Okay, well, we're going to use the b value, right? We're going to use that negative 8 in there. But it's negative 8 divided by 2 squared. So negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. And remember, that magic number is always going to be positive. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. So now, if we factor our perfect square trinomial, what is our perfect square trinomial going to be? Well, the square root of x is going to be, or the square root of x squared is just going to be x. What's the square root of 16? 4. Is it plus 4 or minus 4? Minus, because we have that negative 8x. And that is equal to negative 14 plus 16 is 2. So now, we take the square root of both sides, and we have x minus 4 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 2. Well, y'all, can we simplify the square root of 2? No, there's no factors, so thank the Lord we don't have to simplify it. We can just leave it as the square root of 2, right? Those are my favorite, okay? And so I think, honestly, guys, I think number 4 was the only one you had to simplify. So we have the square root of 2 right here. So now we're going to add 4 to both sides. So we have x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 2. All right, guys? How do y'all feel about that? So, guys, remember, this is 2 solutions. All right? So let's see. Now, guys, I never actually graphed it to see if we had 2 solutions. So let's do that now. Negative 8x squared plus 14, right? That was our original equation after we got the negative 3 out of there. Okay, we do have our 2 solutions. So it's 4, let's see here, 4 plus the square root of 2 is one of them, and 4 minus the square root of 2 is one of them. So that's 5.4. And then 2.58, 2.6-ish. Let's go back to our graph. All right, that looks pretty good. We got about a 2.6. And, yep, that looks about right, 5.4. So, guys, you can always plug in the values and see what weird decimal, that irrational decimal it gives you, and actually check it on your graph and make sure it's eyeball in the correct range there. All right? How do y'all feel about this? This is a beast, all right, guys? It's super important. Honestly, guys, one of the most important things for you guys to remember about today's lesson is going to be that magic number, that b over 2 squared. If you can find that right magic number, then it makes this really nice, all right, guys? And here's the thing. You can technically complete the square every time. But if you complete the square and you get a perfect square on this side, then that means you also just could have factored it, which makes it so. Don't do all this extra work if you can just factor it. Does that make sense, guys? You guys kind of tracking me there? So don't do the extra work if you can just factor. All right. So now I want you guys to grab a Chromebook and let's get to work on that homework. All right.